Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Her Mistake Was Framed in the Living Room. She'll never forget the mistake she made. I personally never had a situation, but I did hear of a story that got my interest, so I will share it with you. A man came home early one day to find his wife in bed with another man, someone who he had never known. They were busy when he walked in on them. He politely told them to finish what they were doing and asked if they would like some coffee. Both said yes, and he closed the bedroom door and proceeded to the kitchen to make coffee. He placed the tray with the cups and milk and biscuits on the center table in the lounge and waited for his wife and lover. She arrived in the lounge dressed in her bathrobe and the lover was fully clothed. The husband proceeded to pour coffee for his wife and lover and offered them the biscuits. Neither wanted, as they were both extremely nervous. The husband began talking to the lover about all kinds of things, except the scenario. After about an hour, the husband politely asked the lover how much money he had on him. The lover, rummaging through his pockets, found a $1 note. The husband took this note and asked the chap never to set foot back in his house again. He didn't even confront his wife about the incident, but the following day he took the $1 note to a dry cleaner and asked them to please try to make it look like a new note and steam it and press it. He would collect it later. He collected the note and went off to a glass shop. He got 2 pieces of 10mm glass and had the glass shop put the $1 note in between the 2 pieces of glass. Once sealed, he took it home and had a bricklayer come to his home and remove a few bricks from the wall in the lounge and also close to the ceiling. He had an electrician come in and lay electric cabling and install a light in the opening. He then got the bricklayer back and installed the glass brick containing the $1 note. Not once did he mention the incident about his wife's infidelity to anyone or even to her. Cool as a cucumber he was, however. Whenever they had visitors and they sat in the lounge, he would put the light on, exposing the $1 note in the glass brick. When asked why the $1 note in a glass brick, he would reply, "Ask the wife, she will tell you." Needless to say, she ended up in a mental institution in Sandton, Johannesburg. The next one is titled, You Want to See Me in Court? I'll see you in court. In my working life, I was a mechanical services contractor. I owned and ran an air conditioning company. No ethnic origin mentioned here, but we did find customers from one particular European country difficult to get along with and please. They always wanted something for nothing. We had a client come in one day and ask one of my sales guys to design an air conditioning system for his house. Gary, our salesman, did and had the recommendations and quote delivered to the client. We didn't hear back from the client and presumed that the business ended up somewhere else. About 9 months later, a very irate person entered the building wanting to talk to the manager, me. He fumed his way into my office and proceeded to tell me his air conditioning didn't work and he required compensation. I calmly said to him, "Are you a customer of ours?" He said, "Yes. I came here 9 months ago and you designed an air conditioning system for me." I said, "Sorry, I can't place you. What's your name and I will get the file out. Tell me, when did we install this system for you?" He said, "No, you didn't install it. My family members are all competent tradespeople. They did the job, but you designed it, and it doesn't work." I said to him, "Are you seriously expecting me to take responsibility for something I did not have any part in supplying and installing? If you are seriously mistaken." He got up and said ever so aggressively, "See you in court." I said to him, "Now hang on, this is not an admission of any liability, but would you like one of our guys to have a look at the unit and see if we can find an issue for you? When you run a business you must be a diplomat and a conciliator." He agreed, and there set the most amazing sequence of following events. Backtrack, about 5 months before, our unit lockup had been broken into. The bastards had one of those roaming scanners that search frequencies until it gets a match, and as soon as it does, bingo, the electric roller door opens. They cleaned us out, took 8 brand new units, copper piping, and electrical gear. Back to the present, I organized for one of our service guys to go and have a look at this unit. He did and reported that the installation was fine, but the unit did have a faulty reversing valve and refrigerant was bypassing, compromising the performance of the machine. I got the Friggy to get the details off the machine, and I would try to get some manufacturers to help this customer. When our guys brought back the information, it turns out this non-performing unit, which was going to end us up in court, was, in fact, one of the units that had been stolen from our lockup 5 months before. I rang the customer and said to him, "The unit does indeed have a problem, and I would like to get the manufacturer to accept responsibility. Could you please give me the purchase details for this unit?" The reason I made that call to him was, I wanted his version of the purchase, and of course, that conversation was recorded. This was what I wanted to hear. He said, "My cousin bought the unit from XYZ and sold it to me as part of a family deal. There you go, noose around the neck." I said to him, "Well, mate, you have shafted me twice. 1. You came in here after free advice which you then wanted to use against me for your advantage. 2. The serial number of your unit matches one that was stolen from my premises 5 months ago. At this point, it's become a police matter, goodbye." I hung up the phone and I thought, sucked in, you jerk. I gave all the serial numbers to the police for a second time, and this time, as they had a red-hot lead, they managed to track down all but 2 of the stolen units. It was 3 months later when I next saw him and his cousin in the dock, and the judge asked me if I could identify anyone in this courtroom, and I said to the judge, "Yes, Your Honor, that person over there, the one on the right," said he would see me in court. The next one is titled, "Steal My Driver's Permit?" Here's a failing grade. Fair trade if you ask me. In high school, a guy stole my driver's permit. He was trying to bully me, but I was huge, 6 feet 4 inches, and took martial arts from a very young age, so I was confident that I could easily take this butt hat. He would come up to me every day and show me that he still had my permit. I really never gave a crap and just got a replacement in the mail. Cut to a year or so later and I'm a teacher's assistant for a science teacher. I have no idea why she wanted me to help her, because she hated me when I was in her class. I talked a lot and was generally in a hole, so she was completely justified in her disdain for me. I was also really honest with her and would ensure my actions only affected me, blah blah blah. Back to the story. Well, General Butthead ends up in one of the classes that I helped with. I should also point out that this teacher was also the girls' softball coach, and so I would help her grade papers and stuff while she was teaching so she could have a relaxing evening after work. I start grading papers and I get to this guy's paper. I start grading it and give him a really shitty grade. I assumed I'd do it once, and if she caught on I could just claim I made a mistake and it would blow over quickly. She never caught on. Well, after several tests, months of doing this, he was failing the class. It was his senior year and he needed this class to graduate. Well, the end of the year comes around and he's gotten his F up to a D, but he still failed. So now he either has to do community service, our school was weird like that, or he had to go to summer school. I can't even begin to describe my joy as I watched him pick up trash along the main route in our town for the entire summer. I finally stopped and talked to him and let him know I purposely failed him, and if he'd have studied at all he would have known the answers were actually correct, but he was too stupid to figure that out. He was livid, and then I said, "This is payback for being a dick and stealing my driver's permit." His face was amazing. The next one is titled, "She Tried to Get Away with Stealing My Bookshelves Until I Threatened to Get the Cops Involved." Once she realized that she wasn't above the law, then she decided to rightfully pay. I listed some bookshelves for sale on Craigslist. A woman called about them and wanted to see them, but we weren't going to be home. I usually had good Craigslist karma, so I told her I'd leave them on our porch. If she liked them she could take them and leave a check in our mailbox on the porch. We come home later that day and bookshelves are gone but no check. I call her and she says she hadn't got a chance to swing by yet. This sounded suspicious because she was adamant about seeing them earlier that day. I hung up, thought about it and hatched a plan. I didn't want to outright accuse her in case I was wrong, so I called her back and told her I was sorry the bookshelves wouldn't be available as it seemed someone had stolen them off my porch. She was like, "Wow, that's a bummer," etc. and I told her, actually, it's funny, because my elderly neighbor, he's so nosy, he spends all his time staring out the window. When he saw someone on our porch taking things, he wrote down their license plate number. I mean, I hate that he's always watching us, but in this case, it turned out okay because my husband's a state trooper and he'll just run the plates. She kinda laughed weakly, and I told her when my husband retrieved the shelves, if they were still in good condition, I'd call her. She thanked me and hung up. Not 5 minutes later she called me back, and guess what? Her sister had taken her car and picked up the shelves for her. What a nice sister. She didn't even tell me she was going to do it, so I had no idea. So, no need to run those plates, ha. When can I bring the $? Now. Is now good? The next one is titled, Sorry for giving you extra cheese curds, I'll give you the exact amount next time. It's beyond me that someone would get angry about receiving extra cheese curds. I used to work at a place that sold burgers and ice cream. I quit because the manager had a favoritism problem, but that's a different story. I was a cook, and our restaurant was unique in the fact that the kitchen was openly visible to the customers, as we had a big counter that we called out people's orders and delivered food at. This was a magnet for entitled people. Let's just say, no one came back to the counter to compliment the food. People would complain about the food to my face often. One day, after a couple of months of starting work, an older couple came in and ordered a single order of small cheese curds. Technically, we were supposed to level off a small measuring cup of curds before cooking them, but I found the small cup for the curds way too small, so I usually just eyeballed it. I saw this couple had only ordered a small to split between the two of them, so I, being a nice, benevolent minimum wage burger flipper, gave them some extra. I called the couple's number, and they came to the counter. The lady, who will be called Karen, looked at the basket of curds like it was something vile and said, "Is this the small size?" I explained to her that it wasn't quite large, but I did top her off with a little extra. Karen looked at me like I had spit in the food and said, "Actually, we would like this to go now." Like she didn't want to be in the restaurant anymore? I put the food in a to-go bag, and as the couple was leaving, she sneered at me, her voice oozing sarcasm, "Have a great night." I told my co-worker what happened and that I was confused, and he told me that sometimes people get offended when given more food than they ordered, like they were being pitied or something. I shrugged it off and continued work as usual. Enter the petty revenge. A few months later I was working a late shift when I saw a single order of cheese curds pop up on the screen. I looked into the dining area and, sure enough, it was the same couple. So, I did what any good employee would do, I filled the order. I took the measuring cup and scooped the curds in, and then proceeded to level it off perfectly. I took extra care in making sure that it was exactly a small cheese curds. Once cooked, there were only like 7 cheese curds to split between 2 people. I called out the order number and gave them the tray with my best smile. "Enjoy." The couple looked at the pitiful amount of curds in the basket. Karen gave a sheepish thanks, and they took the tray to a table. I watched for the next few minutes as the couple finished the tray very quickly, and just sort of sat there for a while after. I giggled to myself the whole time. I know it's not that glamorous or interesting, but I think it was pretty petty, and it felt good to stand up for myself a bit. After all, the customer is always right. The next one is titled, The Best Way to Deal with High Beams in Your Mirrors. This is from 20 years ago. Preamble: I was living in a country area where the road was shared between normal cars and agricultural vehicles of all sorts. Farmers often contract out the spraying of their crops, and the contractors often use UTEs, trucks, with all sorts of lights. These lights are set to illuminate a boom sprayer at night time. Boom sprayers are often 20 to 30 meters wide. This means they are basically 8+ spotlights at all angles to illuminate a 50 meters wide path so they don't hit things, because that's how wide the sprayer is. That is a lot of light. Story: I was driving down the highway at night with some traffic, nothing crazy. 1 lane each way. There is a ute ahead of me, and a small car behind. The small car is in a big rush and passes me as soon as they can. They pull up to maybe 20 meters behind the ute, and for whatever reason they hit the high beam and don't turn it off. At first I figure it's an accident. After a few seconds, I'm not so sure. After 5 seconds, the ute activates its defenses and turns on the rear lights. Night turned to day in an impressive fashion. I was about 500 meters back, and I was impressed at the lumens. The small car smashed the brake pedal and promptly flicked to low beam. For the next 20 kilometers, until the small car could pass normally, they hung back at a normal distance with respectable lights. Not much, but I giggled. The next one is titled, "Don't Be Rude to Parking Enforcement." This happened about a decade ago to a family friend. The cast, a parking enforcement officer, PE, his boss, PB, and an unpleasant, rude, entitled driver, Ed. PE is working in a car park, checking cars aren't talking up 2 spaces, ticketing cars that have overstayed, etc. He's just ticketed a car that has been parked over 2 spaces, and in which the ticket displayed was no longer valid. It's a pay and display car park, and you purchase a ticket for a number of hours. Ed appears, sees PE near his car, and runs up to it. Upon seeing the enforcement ticket, he asks PE what it is for and is told it's for overstaying in the car park and parking across 2 bays. Ed gets angry and starts swearing at PE, "What the duck do you think you're doing? Do you know who I am? You ducking a hole," and so on. PE doesn't have time for this attitude, and tells Ed to "just duck off, will you?" Ed is too shocked to respond, so he huffs and gets in his car and drives off. Later on, as PE finishes his working day, and he's back in the office, he's called into PB's office. PB says he has an irate customer on the phone, on hold, who's complaining about how the enforcement officer has told him to duck off. PB says, "Is this true, PE?" and PE has the opportunity to give his side of the story. PB says, "Right. I'll just finish the conversation with the customer, and if like you to wait." Here in my office, PB goes back into the call, and says to Ed, "Well, I've just spoken to the enforcement officer in question, and I think, given the fact that you were very abusive towards him first, that on balance, it's only fair if you just duck off," and ended the call. PE wasn't in trouble. The next one is titled, "I Don't Need Protection." I work at a gas station and I get a lot of abuse from people, especially over wearing mask. Today I dealt with too much of it and my patiences were gone. This guy came in and right away I politely told him he needed to wear a mask. He of course rolled his eyes, zipped up his jacket and pulled it to where it barely covered his nose. I decided it wasn't worth it if he at least kept his face covered. But right away he lets his jacket drop when my attention went back to my original customer. I told him to please cover his face and he ignored me while being rude to my coworker. That's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna duck with this guy. So after my customer left I started coughing, just to see if I can get a reaction out of him. It took 3 rounds of fake coughing to get him to speak up. "You're telling me to put on a mask but you're over there coughing. You shouldn't be back there." I'm glad I was wearing a mask so he couldn't see my grin. "Well sir, I am wearing a mask and if you were wearing one you would be protected." He sure didn't like that. "I don't need to be protected, I was in Iraq dodging bombs." "Okay sir," I was trying not to laugh. "You think you're so funny. Why don't you come outside and fight me like a man?" "Nah, I'm good. Have a nice night," and he just stormed out saying something under his breath, not sure what. But it's funny how the mask didn't matter till it affected him directly. The next one is titled, "Try to Cut the Line." Sure, you can go before me when I'm next. Before COVID hit, my wife and I loved to cruise. 12 cruises in and very few problems. Unfortunately, many people feel they're far more important than anyone else, especially when it comes to the line at the purser's guest services desk. Everyone has just one question, so some try to circumvent the line. As was the case with one very self-entitled woman. The line was about 8 or 9 people deep and I was third in line. Little Miss I'm so important tried to talk her way to being first, but the guy was having nothing to do with it. She tried to get the guy who was second to allow her in and she was starting to get all whiny and confrontational about how important her question is. She then came to me and asked to cut ahead of me. Normally I would have said no way, but looking back and seeing the length, I knew what I was going to do. I said, "Sure, just let me get to the head of the line, then you can go ahead of me." She gleamed and said thank you, while standing there with a smug look on her face. She won. Guy in front of the line moved up, I'm now second. At this moment I turned to the guy behind me and offered him to cut ahead of me, making me third again. Little miss, I'm so important, saw this and asked why I did this. I said, I'm in no hurry, so I let him go next. She huffed, but said nothing else. I did that 4 more times before she caught on to what I was doing and screamed at me to immediately allow her in the line. I said, you better ask everyone behind me if they'd mind. By now the line had more than 10 people behind me. One voice behind me said, no ducking way. Her jaw dropped and, knowing she had been beat, she slinked to the back of the line. When I finally got to the desk, the person behind it congratulated me for a job well done. I also got a $200 on-board credit for what I did. Even with that, it was so worth it to put someone in their place. The last one is titled, I let someone cut in front of me in traffic to irritate the asshole behind me. I was driving home from work the other day and there happened to be construction on the road I take. It had been cut down to only 1 lane instead of 2 and the lanes had to merge together. I was doing my civil part in completing the zipper. Left car, right car, left car, right car. I had let someone in front of me, and then it was my turn to go. However, I noticed that the person behind me was riding so close that I couldn't even see their windshield. I looked over my shoulder and it became apparent that they were tailgating me to avoid letting an F-250 get behind me like they were supposed to. I hate people like this, so I hit the brakes and purposefully held up traffic for long enough for the truck to get past me and merge into the 1-lane road. I looked in my mirror and the passenger in the aforementioned car was laughing their butt off. If this isn't petty, I don't know what is, but I felt very satisfied after that. Thanks for listening.